cast out. The wind carried the smell of dust and dry earth across Willow Creek, a settlement more known for its stubborn traditions than its kindness. In that town, whispers carried faster than the stagecoach, and judgment weighed heavier than the cattle brands on the ranchers' herds. Mara knew that truth too well. She had gone into labor in the old family cabin, with only her mother's worn hands to guide her. The cries had been long, her body racked with pain, but when it was over, 3 tiny wails filled the room. Not one baby, not 2, 3. All girls. Her mother's face had drained of color. "Triplets," she whispered as though the word itself were cursed. 3 daughters. Lord have mercy. Instead of joy, silence had fallen. Instead of smiles, there had been pursed lips and lowered eyes. By morning, the elders of the town had gathered outside the cabin, their verdict written on their faces before a word was spoken. "They'll drain you dry," one muttered. 3 mouths, no father to speak for them, no land to raise them on, said another. And then, the cruelest cut. "A woman who brings such an omen does not belong among decent folk." By sundown, Mara stood on the edge of town with nothing but a threadbare shawl, a small bundle of swaddled babies, and the echo of the door slamming shut behind her. 4 days she walked. The prairie sun blazed above, and the nights clawed with cold. She begged scraps from kitchens, filled tin cups from creek water, and rocked her daughters when their hunger turned their tiny voices sharp with need. Every barn door she knocked on, every porch she approached, ended the same way: a man's hard eyes, a woman's pursed lips, and a slammed door. 3 mouths. "You'll have us starve before winter. Bad luck follows women like you. Move along." And so she moved along. Her only companions were the 3 girls, Lydia, Rose, and May, each small as a sparrow, their faces mirrors of one another. To Mara, they were miracles. To the world, they were burdens. It was on the 5th night, as the babies whimpered for milk she had little left to give, that she saw him. The silent rancher. That was the only name she had heard in passing from the townsfolk. A man who owned a spread at the far edge of Willow Creek's grazing lands. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and kept to himself. Folks said he spoke less than a handful of words in a week. Some claimed he was broken from war. Others whispered darker things, that he carried ghosts on his back. Whatever the truth, people left him alone, the same way they left the rattlers and the cougars that roamed the hills. Now, under the pale light of a rising moon, he sat astride a black horse at the ridge above her campfire. He did not speak, did not move, only watched. Mara clutched her daughters tighter, her heart thudding. "I'll move on by morning," she called, her voice trembling. The man said nothing. After a moment, he tugged the reins and disappeared into the dark. But when she woke at dawn, a tin pail of fresh water and a small sack of cornmeal lay by the dying fire. For the next week, it happened again. Every time she thought she was alone, she'd catch sight of him at a distance, by the ridge, at the tree line, or watching from across a creek. Silent as shadow. He never approached, never spoke, but small gifts began to appear: a loaf of bread, a coil of rope, a wool blanket against the night chill. Mara did not know what to make of it. Gratitude and fear wrestled inside her chest. Who was this man who lingered at the edges of her misery? A savior? A predator? Or simply a lonely rancher passing time by watching the outcast woman and her 3 daughters? The town noticed, too. At the trading post, whispers grew sharper. The silent ones been sniffin' around her. Figures. No decent man would. Maybe he's fool enough to take her in. And always a laugh to follow. Mara bore it as she bore everything else, with lowered head and clenched jaw. Her daughters needed her strong. If she wept, she did so only when their eyes were closed in sleep. One afternoon, weary from walking, Mara reached the edge of Willow Creek town again. She needed milk for the girls, and though pride burned in her throat, she begged at the general store. "Please, Mr. Turner," she said, her shawl slipping as May fussed in her arms. "Just a bottle. I'll work to pay it back. Laundry, sweeping, whatever you need." The storekeeper's wife wrinkled her nose. "3 of 'em, all girls? You'd be better off leavin' them at the church steps." The words struck like a whip. Mara drew herself up, shaking her head. "They are my daughters. I will never abandon them." The woman sniffed. "Then you'll starve with them." Mara turned away, shame burning hot. The eyes of the town followed her down the street, some pitying, most cold, a few openly scornful. She tried to ignore them, but when Rose began to cry, then Lydia, then May, the weight of the moment cracked her resolve. She stumbled into the alley, sinking against the wall, her body shaking with silent sobs. It was there, hidden from view, that she heard the sound of boots. Heavy, steady, unhurried. When she looked up, the silent rancher was there. He stood at the mouth of the alley, tall as the doorway beside him, his hat casting his eyes in shadow. In one hand he carried a small crate. He did not speak, only walked forward and set it down beside her. Inside was milk, bread, a bundle of cloth diapers. Mara stared at the crate, then at him. Her lips parted, words failing. Why are you helping me?" The rancher's gaze held hers for a long, unreadable moment. His jaw worked as if he might speak, but no sound came. Instead, he tipped his hat, turned, and walked away, leaving her trembling between gratitude and confusion. That night, as she fed her daughters with milk he had provided, Mara felt something stir in her chest that had been long buried, hope. But hope was fragile in Willow Creek, and Mara knew better than to trust it too soon. For while the silent rancher had shown kindness, the town had already begun to mutter louder, their gossip turning to warning. The silent hand. The sun was sinking behind the hills when Mara's strength finally broke. She had spent the day walking from ranch to ranch, begging for work, begging for food. Her daughters were growing, their cries sharper now, their hunger harder to quiet. Every door shut in her face, every dismissive glance cut deeper. By the time she reached the town square, her legs trembled beneath her body hollowed out from exhaustion. A crowd had gathered near the well, men finishing their day's trading, women gossiping as they filled buckets. Mara tried to keep her head down, but the triplets, restless, hungry, betrayed her. Lydia's thin wail carried through the square, then Rose's, then May's, until all 3 voices rose in a chorus of need. The conversations faltered. Heads turned. "There she is again," someone muttered. 3 squalling mouths, no husband, no sense. "Why's she still hangin' on? Best she give them girls up." A harsh laugh rose above the rest. "Even the coyotes wouldn't take her in." The words landed like stones. Mara's cheeks burned as tears pricked her eyes. She clutched her daughters closer, trying to shush them, but the noise only grew. The circle of faces around her tightened, curious, mocking, unkind. Her knees gave out. She sank onto the dusty boards beside the well, her shawl slipping away, the girls' cries piercing the evening air. For the first time since the night of their birth, Mara whispered words she had sworn never to speak. "I can't do this. God help me, I can't." A shadow fell over her. The crowd hushed. Boots thudded against the boards, steady and slow. Mara looked up through a blur of tears, and saw him, the silent rancher. He moved through the townsfolk like a storm through dry grass. They parted without a word, unease etched into their faces. His hat brim shadowed his eyes, his jaw set like stone. When he reached Mara, he didn't hesitate. He bent, offering his hand. The world seemed to hold its breath. Mara stared at the callous palm, unsure, trembling. For so long she had known only rejection, only doors slammed and backs turned. To take that hand meant opening herself to a promise she could scarcely believe. Her daughters whimpered in her arms. Slowly, shakily, she placed her free hand in his. The rancher's grip was strong, steady. He pulled her gently to her feet, then glanced at the girls bundled in her arms. Something softened in his expression, just a flicker, but enough for Mara to see he was not untouched. And then, in a voice low and rough from disuse, he spoke the first words she had ever heard from him. "You won't be alone." The square went silent. Mara's breath caught. The words were simple, but to her ears they thundered like salvation. The rancher turned, still holding her hand, and faced the crowd. His gaze swept over them, hard, unflinching, daring anyone to speak. None did. Men shifted uncomfortably, women looked away. A few muttered under their breath, but no one stepped forward. Without another word, he guided Mara through the square. Step by step, they left the whispers behind. His ranch lay miles beyond the town's edge, past rolling fields and barbed wire fences, where the land stretched wide and quiet. The house was plain but sturdy, built of weathered timber, standing solitary against the horizon. Corrals stretched beyond, half filled with cattle, and a barn loomed nearby. Mara hesitated on the porch, clutching her daughters. I don't want to be a burden." The rancher opened the door and stood aside, his silence an answer in itself. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and leather. The rooms were neat, almost too neat, as if untouched by warmth. A man's house, not a home. Until now. He set down her bundles, fetched water, even lit a fire in the hearth. The girls quieted as the chill left the room. Mara, overwhelmed, sank into a chair, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why help me when no one else would?" The rancher paused, as if the weight of speaking was heavy. Finally, he answered, his voice low. "Because I know what it is to be cast out." He said no more, but the pain in those words was enough. Mara didn't press him. Some wounds were best left untouched until the bearer was ready. Days turned to weeks. Life on the ranch was hard but steady. Mara worked alongside him, cooking, tending the garden, mending clothes. He showed her how to care for the cattle, how to patch fences, how to ride the wide pastures when the triplets were old enough to be left in a cradle. The girls thrived. With food in their bellies and warmth at night, their cries softened into coos, their thin limbs grew stronger. Sometimes the rancher would watch them with quiet wonder, though he never said much. His silence, Mara realized, was not emptiness but presence. He spoke in actions, in the steadiness of his hand, in the small kindnesses that built a life brick by brick. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the sky, Mara found him mending a bridle on the porch. She hesitated, then sat beside him, her daughters playing in a basket at her feet. "They'll talk, you know," she said softly. "The town. About me. About you." He kept working, his broad hands sure and patient. "Let them." Mara studied him, the quiet strength in his face, the steadiness in his manner. For so long she had lived under the weight of others' judgment. To hear him dismiss it so simply made something inside her uncoil, like a knot finally loosening. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Taking us in?" At that, he looked at her directly, his blue eyes clear and unflinching. His voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper, yet carried the force of a vow. "Never." Word spread quickly through Willow Creek. The woman once cast out now lived under the roof of the silent rancher. Some said he'd lost his senses, shackling himself with a woman and 3 babes. Others muttered that maybe he'd finally found what he'd been searching for all these years. But the whispers mattered little. Out on the wide prairie, life moved to its own rhythm. The ranch flourished, the girls grew, and Mara found her days filled not with shame but with purpose. On Sunday mornings, when she walked into town beside the rancher, daughters in tow, the townsfolk stepped aside. Their judgment still lingered in their eyes, but none dared speak it aloud, not when his silent presence loomed beside her, unyielding as bedrock. Months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Mara stood at the edge of the porch, watching Lydia, Rose, and May toddle in the grass. Their laughter rang bright, carried by the wind across the fields. Behind her, the rancher came to stand, his shadow falling across hers. She turned, her heart swelling with a gratitude too deep for words. "You saved us," she said softly. He shook his head. "No," his eyes followed the girl's, a faint smile touching his lips. "You saved me." For the first time, Mara took his hand, not in desperation, not in fear, but in love. And though the world beyond might still whisper, On that ranch, among the wide skies and rolling fields, the whispers no longer mattered. What mattered was the life they had built from nothing, the woman once cast out, the 3 daughters once deemed a burden, and the rancher who had whispered the words that changed everything. "You won't be alone,"